1. You cherish solitude as sacred, not lonely. ****. There comes a time in your journey when the silence that once unsettled you begins to feel like home. You no longer fill every quiet moment with noise, with distraction, with the need to be surrounded. You stop fearing your own company. In fact, you begin to crave it, not as an escape, but as a return to yourself. This is the first sign of becoming a high-value person. You cherish solitude not as loneliness, but as sacred space. Once, silence was uncomfortable. It echoed with your doubts. It pressed on the wounds you hadn't yet named. It magnified the emptiness you carried but hadn't yet faced. You feared that without others around, you might disappear. That without noise, you might hear something you weren't ready to know. But growth changes the way silence speaks to you now. You sit in stillness and hear not judgment, but truth, not absence, but presence, not hollowness, but wholeness. You no longer need the crowd to feel valid, the applause to feel worthy, the messages, the mentions, the constant affirmation. You've stopped asking the world to tell you who you are, because now you've begun to listen to the whisper within. In solitude, you begin to meet your soul unmasked. You hear the wisdom underneath the worry. You remember your original voice, the one that existed before the world taught you to perform. You begin to untangle your worth from your productivity. You breathe, not to keep up, but to come home, where once you feared being alone, now you recognize solitude as sacred ceremony. You see it as a clearing, a space where distractions fall away and the truth of who you are rises to the surface. In solitude, you are not lacking. You are learning. You are not lost. You are locating your own light. And that is power. Because a person who can sit with themselves without needing to escape is a person who cannot be manipulated by attention or destroyed by absence. A person who cherishes solitude is a person who is rooted not in ego, but in essence. You begin to protect your solitude the way one protects a flame from the wind. You no longer allow everyone access to your quiet. You stop inviting noise just to feel needed. You are not lonely, you are selective. And in that selectiveness, you find strength. Solitude reveals the difference between being alone and being aligned. You discover that peace is not found in the absence of people, but in the presence of your true self. You start to notice the world differently too. The way the light falls in the early morning, the way your breath steadies when you close your eyes, the way your thoughts soften when you stop trying to be everything at once. You realize that the person you were running from in the beginning was you. And now, in this stillness, you return not with shame but with compassion. You sit beside yourself like an old friend, finally ready to listen, finally ready to be. This is not the kind of solitude that isolates. It is the kind that heals. And so, without fanfare, without announcement, you rise, not louder, but deeper. Not busier, but more intentional. You carry a quiet that cannot be shaken. A peace that cannot be borrowed. A presence that cannot be faked. You no longer run from silence. You walk into it like a sanctuary, because now you know. Solitude isn't the absence of love. It is the birthplace of it. The first sign that you are becoming, not someone new, but someone true. ***2. Your boundaries are acts of self and are ***. There comes a shift in the journey of becoming subtle at first. Like a door quietly closing, to the noise that once consumed you. It is not anger. It is not bitterness. It is clarity. You begin to understand that your energy is sacred, that your peace is not up for negotiation. And so, you draw lines, not to push people away, but to honor the person you've worked so hard to become. This is the second sign of becoming a high-value person. You set and uphold boundaries as sacred acts of self-respect, not as walls to isolate, but as gates that protect what's meaningful, not as shields of fear, but as expressions of love, for yourself and for others. Once you allowed access freely, you gave pieces of yourself away, hoping it would buy you acceptance, admiration, or affection. You let disrespect linger, like dust in the corners of your spirit, believing that tolerance was the price of love. But now you know, love without respect is not love. Kindness without limits is not strength. And saying yes when your soul says no is not generosity, it is self-abandonment. A high-value person learns that boundaries are not a form of rejection. They are a form of instruction. They are not about control, but about communication. You are teaching the world how to treat you, not through demands, but through example. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for needing space, rest, quiet. You stop trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You realize your worth is not up for debate, and so you stop placing it on the table for others to dissect. You understand now that people may be surprised, even upset, when you first begin to enforce your boundaries, especially those who benefited from your lack of them, but you do not shrink. You do not soften truth for comfort's sake, because your peace is not a convenience. It is a priority. Your boundaries are no longer reactive. They are proactive. You don't wait to break before you rest. You don't wait to be disrespected before you speak. You begin to trust the signals your body gives you, the tension in your shoulders, the fatigue in your soul, the quiet voice that says, "This doesn't feel safe." And you listen, because now, you don't see boundaries as selfish. You see them as sacred maintenance of your inner garden. You recognize that not everyone can walk with you into your becoming, and that's okay. You release relationships that require the abandonment of yourself. You let go, not with resentment, but with reverence for your own growth. You bless the past, but you don't bow to it. A high-value person doesn't guard their heart with fear. They tend it with discernment. You love fully, but wisely. You give freely, but not endlessly. You show up for others, but not at the cost of disappearing from yourself. And here's the miracle: when you begin to set boundaries rooted in self-worth, your life starts to change. You attract different conversations. You feel safer in your skin. You wake up with more clarity. You spend less time recovering from people and more time building what matters. This is the quiet revolution of self. And in that revolution, something beautiful happens. You stop needing others to validate your boundaries because you have already validated yourself. And so your no becomes sacred. Your yes becomes powerful. Your presence becomes intentional. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. This is the second sign that you are becoming a high-value person, not one who builds fences to keep the world out, but one who builds thresholds to protect the soul within. 3. You no longer crave constant validation, at one point in your journey, external approval felt like oxygen. You breathed it in from every compliment, every like, every nod of affirmation. You waited for others to tell you who you were, to mirror back your worth, your beauty, your value. And when the mirror was empty, or the praise was delayed, you felt invisible, insufficient. You began to question your light, not because it dimmed, but because no one was clapping. But then something changed, quietly, powerfully. You began to turn inward. You began to see yourself without the filters, without the applause. And in that seeing, something ancient awakened in you. This is the third sign of becoming a high-value person. You stop seeking constant validation because you've remembered your inherent worth. There is a shift that takes place when you realize that being seen is not the same as being known, and that not all eyes are discerning enough to recognize depth. You begin to understand that the world is addicted to surface, to spectacle, to speed, but your value is none of those things. Your value is rooted, eternal, and quietly luminous. It does not shout, it does not dance for attention. It simply is. There was a time when silence from others felt like rejection. Now it feels like peace. There was a time when you needed to be chosen to feel valuable. Now you know. You were never unchosen. You were simply misread by those not meant to carry your story. When you stop craving validation, you begin to live in truth, not performance. You don't shapeshift to fit the room. You don't shrink to be digestible. You don't inflate yourself to impress. You walk into spaces not wondering who will like you, but wondering how authentically you can show up. You no longer dress your worth in decoration. You wear your essence like skin, unfiltered, unforced. You start trusting your own voice. You look in the mirror and recognize yourself again, not because someone told you that you're enough, but because you finally believe it. And that belief, it's not built in moments of praise. It's built in moments of quiet conviction. When you choose integrity over impression. When you speak truth, even when it trembles. When you honor your soul, even when no one is watching. A high-value person knows validation is sweet but not necessary. Recognition is nice but not the root. You can be unseen and still be worthy. You can be misunderstood and still be magnificent. Your self-assurance no longer comes from the volume of praise but from the clarity of purpose. And you notice how your relationships change too. You stop attracting people who are drawn to your performance. You begin to align with those who resonate with your essence. You no longer seek to be everyone's favorite. You are content being someone's real. This is freedom. This is alignment. This is the liberation of the soul from the courtroom of public opinion. And when the world offers applause, you receive it with grace, but not addiction, because whether they clap or not, your worth remains. This is the third sign. You no longer crave constant validation because you are no longer starving for a reflection. You have become the mirror. You have remembered the light was always yours. Asterisk, asterisk 4. You take radical responsibility for your life. Asterisk, asterisk. There comes a moment on the path of becoming when blame no longer feels empowering. When pointing fingers begins to feel hollow. When waiting to be rescued begins to feel like delay. And in that moment, that sacred, honest moment, you stop asking, who caused this? And start asking, what am I going to do with it? This is the fourth sign of becoming a high-value person. You take radical responsibility for your life. Not in the way the world sometimes demands through guilt or shame or performance, but in the way the soul invites, through ownership, through authorship, through the quiet courage to say, this is my life. I choose how I carry it. You begin to realize that while you may not have chosen the wound, you are choosing how it heals. You may not have picked the storm, but you are deciding who you become inside it. No more waiting for the apology that never comes. No more tying your peace to someone else's change. You reclaim your power not by controlling the external, but by commanding the internal. And in that reclamation, your life begins to shift. You stop narrating your story from the voice of a victim. You speak now from the strength of the survivor. You do not deny your pain. No, you honor it. But you no longer let it define you. Radical responsibility is not blame. It is not self-punishment. It is not pretending that injustice didn't happen. It is simply the bold act of deciding that your life will not be built from resentment, but from response. You wake up and say, how I live today is mine. And you stop outsourcing your happiness to circumstance. You stop waiting for motivation, and start moving with discipline. You stop letting fear choose your direction and start letting values lead your steps. And yes, it's hard, because it's easier to wait. Easier to say, they didn't support me, or life hasn't been fair. But you know now, easier is not the same as empowered. A high-valued person embraces the truth that responsibility is not a burden, it is a crown. It is not weight that crushes, it is a structure that builds. It is the moment you stop rehearsing your limitations and begin practicing your liberation. You begin to rewrite the narrative, not with delusion, but with decision. You no longer say, this is just how I am. You ask, who do I choose to become? Your life becomes less about control, and more about choice. Less about perfection, and more about alignment. And the people around you begin to feel it. They see it in your eyes, that steadiness. That quiet refusal to be a product of circumstance. You have become the architect of your own becoming. Brick by brick, breath by breath. And when setbacks come, as they will, you don't spiral into self-pity. You pause. You assess. You pivot. You rise. Because you have taught yourself how to be accountable without being cruel. How to be self-aware without self-erasure. You own your triggers. You own your patterns. You own your power. And it shows. This is the fourth sign. You are no longer living life as a reaction. You are living it as a response. Not a puppet of the past, but a co-creator of the future. And that, dear soul, is power of the highest kind. 5. You lead with compassion first for yourself, then for others. Somewhere along the journey of becoming, a gentle shift unfolds, not loud, not sudden, but soft like rain on tired soil. You stop being so harsh with yourself. You stop waging war against your younger self. You stop measuring your worth by your wounds. And for the first time in a long time, you hold yourself, not with critique, but with compassion. This is the fifth sign of becoming a high-value person. You begin to lead with compassion, a compassion that starts within and extends without. There was a time when your inner voice mimicked the harshness of the world. Every mistake became a sentence. Every flaw became a scarlet letter. You believed that if you just fixed enough, improved enough, proved enough, you'd be worthy of softness. But now, you understand, growth rooted in self-hatred is not healing, it is hiding. You cannot shame yourself into wholeness. You begin to remember that every version of you, even the one that stumbled, even the one that stayed too long, even the one that broke, was doing the best it could with what it knew. And instead of rejecting those parts, you welcome them home. You no longer see your pain as weakness, but as proof you were willing to feel. You no longer see your past as something to erase, but something to integrate. This is what compassion looks like, not perfection but presence, not judgment, but gentleness, not denial, but deep, steady acknowledgement, and as your compassion for yourself deepens, something else happens. You begin to see others differently too. You stop assuming malice where there is confusion. You start seeing the wound behind the outburst, the ache behind the armor. You no longer feel the need to win in every conversation. You start choosing understanding over ego. You extend grace, not because people always deserve it, but because you have learned how powerful grace can be. You remember what it's like to be lost, unsure, afraid, and because you remember, you do not condemn. You do not belittle to feel tall. You do not compete to feel worthy. You lift because you know what it's like to fall. You listen because you know what it's like to be unheard. You hold space because you know what it's like to be dismissed. A high-value person understands this. Compassion is not weakness. It is the strongest force there is. It builds bridges where walls once stood. It calms fires the world said could not be tamed. It does not enable, it empowers. It does not tolerate abuse, it chooses understanding and self-respect. And yes, compassion has boundaries. It does not require you to stay in places that drain you. It does not demand that you become a savior. It simply invites you to be human, to hold empathy without self-erasure, to carry kindness without abandoning discernment. When you lead with compassion, your presence changes rooms. People feel safe, not because you agree with everything, but because your energy says, you don't have to perform to belong. And maybe that's the most revolutionary act in this world, to live with an open heart in a time that tells you to guard it, to speak with love in a culture that rewards cynicism, to believe in redemption when bitterness feels easier, but you do it anyway. Not because it's easy but because it's true. Because you have learned that the person who can hold space for their own healing becomes a lighthouse for others in the dark. This is the fifth sign. You lead with compassion, not performatively, but from the core. You become someone who doesn't just preach healing, you embody it. Your life becomes proof that gentleness and strength are not enemies, but sacred partners in the work of becoming whole. And when others encounter you, they may not always know what to call it, but they will feel it. They will feel seen. They will feel safe. They will feel the depth of a person who has chosen to love themselves back to life, and now offers that same love to the world. 6. You honor discipline as devotion, not punishment. There is a kind of quiet power that doesn't shout. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. It builds in silence, grows in the dark, and blooms without applause. This power is discipline, not the rigid, cold kind imposed by fear, but the sacred, steady kind born of love. This is the sixth sign of becoming a high-value person. You honor discipline not as punishment, but as devotion. There was a time when discipline felt like restriction. It felt like sacrifice, like saying no to what you wanted in the moment just to prove something to the world. It felt heavy, cruel, even the voice of an inner critic disguised as a coach. But now you see it differently. Discipline has become your act of reverence, your daily prayer to who you're becoming. Because you've realized, what you repeat, you become. What you give time to, grows. And what you choose when no one is watching, that becomes your life. You no longer chase motivation like a spark, fleeting and unreliable. You have learned to move without feeling ready. You rise, even when it's inconvenient. You show up, even when it's quiet. Because now you know. Integrity is built in the ordinary. There is strength in choosing the higher path. Not because it's easy, but because it's aligned. You are not driven by urgency anymore, you are grounded in rhythm. The rhythm of showing up. Of keeping your word to yourself. Of tending to your growth like a garden. Patiently, consistently, lovingly. And when you fall short because you don't spiral into shame. You recalibrate. You learn. You return. Discipline is no longer about controlling yourself, it's about caring for yourself. You no longer say no out of deprivation. You say no because you have direction. You protect your time. You curate your energy. You choose what feeds your future, not just what soothes your fear. A high-value person understands. Freedom is not found in doing whatever you want. True freedom is found in mastery, in being able to say, I will not abandon myself in this moment for fleeting comfort. In choosing purpose over impulse, alignment over distraction. Discipline doesn't make your life narrower, it makes it deeper. It creates space for joy that is not chaotic. It cultivates peace that isn't circumstantial. It allows purpose to take root and blossom, even when the world outside is uncertain, and as your discipline grows, so does your trust in yourself. Not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent. And consistency is one of the most sacred forms of self-respect. It tells your soul, I will not leave you hanging. I will not betray you for convenience. I will carry you to where we're meant to go. This is devotion. You begin to feel it in your body, the energy of a person who isn't pulled in every direction. You feel it in your mind, the clarity of someone who doesn't chase every temptation. And you feel it in your spirit, the quiet pride of someone who follows through. Discipline doesn't make you less spontaneous, it makes your spontaneity safe. It doesn't crush your creativity, it creates a container for it to flourish. You're no longer ruled by chaos. You've made peace with structure, not as a cage, but as a cradle. And others feel it. They sense the steadiness in you, the reliability, the quiet integrity that shows up whether or not anyone is clapping. They trust your words because they see your follow-through. This is the sixth sign. You no longer resist discipline. You revere it. You treat it not as punishment, but as a love language. The way you say to yourself, you matter enough to commit to. You wake up not asking, what do I feel like doing? But what does the version of me I'm becoming need today? And you answer, not always perfectly, but faithfully. Because you're no longer chasing intensity. You're cultivating endurance. And in that endurance, your life becomes a lighthouse. Steady, strong, rooted. This is the discipline of the soul, the kind that doesn't bruise, it builds. The kind that doesn't chain you, it frees you. The kind that doesn't pressure you to be more, but reminds you that you already are. 7. You inspire others simply by being fully yourself. There is a beauty that does not beg to be noticed. There is a power that does not push. There is a presence that does not perform. And when you begin to live in alignment with your deepest truth, without apology, without pretense, you become that presence. This is the seventh and final sign of becoming a high-value person. You inspire others, not by trying to, but simply by being fully, freely, and authentically yourself. Not long ago, you may have felt the urge to prove your worth. You may have tried to shine in ways the world could measure, through titles, through image, through applause. You may have thought influence meant being loud, taking up space, being chosen. But now, you understand. True influence is not about volume. It is about vibration. The highest frequency you can emit is authenticity. You no longer wear masks to make others comfortable. You no longer shrink your truth to fit in the frame of someone else's expectations. You no longer abandon your essence for the illusion of acceptance. Instead, you show up fully. With your story, your softness, your strength. You stand in the light of who you are, without needing to outshine anyone else. You realize that becoming high value has never been about being above it. Has always been about being real, and when you are real, the world feels it. People begin to lean in, not because you demanded attention, but because your presence gives them permission. Permission to be human. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to be enough. You are no longer trying to impress. You are trying to embody. You don't perform for the crowd. You live for the call, the one that rises from within, that asks you to stay faithful to your becoming. You understand now that you do not need to inspire others by being perfect. You inspire by being honest. You share your story not as a trophy, but as a testimony. You speak of your healing not to elevate yourself, but to invite others into theirs. You say, I've been there too, and suddenly the person across from you feels less alone. This is not performance. This is presence. A high-value person does not lead with charisma, they lead with character. They do not try to be a mold for others to follow. They become a mirror in which others can see their own strength reflected back. You no longer try to fit in. You create spaces where others can belong. You no longer chase recognition, you move with quiet conviction. And, oh, how magnetic that is. Not because you tried to be admired, but because you remembered who you were, and you walked in it, without hesitation. You let your light be soft, not blinding, but warming. You let your voice be clear, not sharp, but resonant. You let your truth be visible, not to dominate, but to guide. You have stopped hiding. You know now that your light is not a threat, it is an invitation. And when others see it, they are not intimidated, they are inspired. Not because you told them to rise, but because you gave them an example of what rising looks like. This is the final sign. Your life begins to speak. Even when your lips are still, your integrity walks ahead of you, your authenticity lingers in every room you leave. Your essence leaves an imprint, not because of performance, but because of presence. You are no longer chasing impact. You are impact, simply by being who you are, fully. This is what becoming high value was always about. Not just for your own becoming, but for the becoming of others. Your healing is contagious. Your wholeness becomes a map. And your joy, your real, earned joy becomes a revolution. Asterisk, asterisk, 8. You attract alignment. Not attention, asterisk, asterisk, there comes a time in your becoming when you no longer chase the spotlight. Not because you fear being seen, but because you've learned to see yourself. You no longer burn your energy trying to be everywhere, with everyone, for everything. You no longer confuse visibility with value. You've started walking in alignment, and with it, you begin to attract what truly resonates with your soul. This is the 8th sign. You attract alignment. Not attention. In your past, you may have contorted yourself to fit rooms where your spirit didn't breathe freely. You may have worn versions of yourself like costumes, hoping to be chosen. You mistook noise for necessity. You thought the number of eyes on you determined your worth. But now, you've shifted. You understand that not everything that shines is meant for you. You know that being seen by many is meaningless if you are not first seen by yourself. Attention is fleeting. It is a gust of wind. It lifts you one moment, forgets you the next. But alignment is soil. It roots you, it holds you. It asks, not that you dazzle, but that you be true. You begin to make different choices now. You don't follow the crowd, you follow your compass. You don't perform for likes, you live for legacy. You say no to what distracts, even if it's dressed in praise. You say yes to what nourishes, even if it comes in silence. And when you do that, something sacred happens. You stop attracting chaos. You stop inviting relationships that mirror your unhealed parts. You stop feeling pulled in directions that don't match your rhythm. Instead, your life begins to reflect your peace. Conversations feel different, slower, deeper. Connections feel truer, rooted not in what you offer, but in who you are. Opportunities come not because you begged, but because you became the version of yourself that could receive them. This is the quiet magic of alignment. You no longer chase, you attract. Not from a place of arrogance, but from authenticity. Not from superiority, but from sovereignty. You don't demand energy, you magnetize it. You begin to notice when you are no longer desperate to be seen. You are seen by the right ones. When you no longer betray your values to be included, you're included in spaces built on truth. When you stop proving, you start belonging. The world tries to sell you attention, constantly. It asks you to trade your peace for popularity, to water yourself down for appeal, to rush, to post, to push. But you are choosing something else now. You're choosing depth over display. Stillness over spectacle, resonance over reach. A high-value person knows, it is better to be deeply aligned with 5 people than shallowly praised by 5,000. It is better to be anchored in truth than applauded for your performance. Because applause fades, but alignment builds. It builds purpose. It builds peace. It builds a life that means something beyond the moment. You begin to trust the timing of your life. You stop measuring your path by someone else's pace. You no longer rush to arrive. You honor where your feet are now. You walk your journey, not to impress, but to embody. And perhaps most beautifully of all, you stop being addicted to potential in others and in yourself. You stop trying to force things to fit that clearly do not. You bless the people who leave. You release the versions of you that no longer belong. You make peace with the pruning because you know it's making space for what's meant to grow. This is the 8th sign. You've stopped chasing attention. You've started attracting alignment. And in doing so, your life becomes less chaotic, but more meaningful. Less full, but more fulfilling. You are no longer spread thin, you are deeply rooted, and when others meet you now, they may not know why, but they will feel the difference. They will feel the steadiness of someone who is no longer proving, but simply being. They will feel the depth of someone who has chosen soul over spectacle. They will feel the integrity of someone who knows. It is not about being everywhere, it is about being fully here. 9. You embrace wholeness over perfection, asterisk, asterisk. There comes a point on the path of becoming where you stop trying to fix yourself like a broken object and begin to embrace yourself like a sacred whole. You no longer treat your flaws as failures. You no longer view your wounds as shameful. You begin to see, truly see, that you were never meant to be flawless. You were meant to be real. This is the 9th sign of becoming a high-value person. You no longer strive for perfection. You strive for wholeness. Wholeness is not shiny. It is not curated or polished for public consumption. Wholeness is raw. It is honest. It includes the scar and the smile, the darkness and the dawn, the ache and the aliveness, all woven into one beautiful, breathing truth. You are already enough. There was a time you couldn't believe that. You measured yourself in comparison and came up lacking. You edited your personality to earn belonging. You apologized for your softness, for your sensitivity, for your stumbling. You thought perfection was the goal, that if you could just get everything right, you'd finally be worthy of love, of peace, of rest. But then something shifted. You got tired. Tired of the masks. Tired of the performance. Tired of treating yourself like a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved. So you stopped. Not because you gave up, but because you woke up. And in waking, you remembered what wholeness actually means. It means you're allowed to be a paradox. Strong and soft. Brave and unsure. Healing and still hurting. You began to offer yourself the grace you'd given everyone else. You started speaking to yourself with kindness instead of criticism. You allowed your past selves to be seen, not condemned. You looked at the younger you, the confused, aching, striving version, and instead of judging her, you held her. You no longer shame your mistakes. You study them. You learn from them. You use them as stepping stones, not shackles. Because you understand now. Perfection isolates. It says, you must earn love. Wholeness integrates. It says, you already are loved. You don't pretend anymore. If you're hurting, you say so. If you're tired, you rest. If you're unsure, you get curious instead of self-critical. This authenticity is power, not the performative kind, but the deeply rooted kind. And when others encounter it in you, they exhale. Because in your humanness, they recognize their own. You're no longer trying to hide your shadows. You've made peace with them. You've learned they're not evidence of your failure, but invitations to deepen your light. You know now that being high value isn't about being always in control. It's about being in alignment. It's about being honest with yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about showing up fully, imperfectly, you. Wholeness means owning your story. All of it, not just the chapters that make sense, but also the ones that nearly broke you. It means walking into the world as you are, unapologetic, unmasked, no longer trying to be someone's ideal but anchored in your own truth. And that kind of self-possession, that kind of integrity, it's rare. It's magnetic. It's transformational because in a world obsessed with perfection, your wholeness becomes rebellion, your softness becomes strength, your self-acceptance becomes revolution. This is the 9th sign. You have stopped striving to appear perfect. You have chosen to live whole. And in doing so, you free not only yourself, but everyone who's ever been told they needed to be better to be worthy. You are not fragments. You are not flaws. You are not unfinished. You are whole, even as you grow, even as you heal, even as you rise. You do not become high value by hiding the messy parts. You become high value by including them in the sacred story of who you are. Asterisk, asterisk, 10. You move through life with intentional grace, asterisk, asterisk. There is a grace that is not soft-spoken, not timid, not weak. There is a grace that comes from choosing your steps, from pausing when the world rushes, from responding when others react, from living, not by default, but by design. This is the 10th sign of becoming a high-value person. You move through life with intentional grace. You no longer stumble through your days, chasing what's urgent but missing what's meaningful. You've stopped being dragged by the noise of the world, the opinions of others, the chaos of comparison. You've learned to walk your path deliberately, not perfectly, not quickly but consciously. Once, you may have mistaken busyness for purpose. Your calendar was full, but your soul was empty. You said yes to everything because you feared missing out, feared letting someone down, feared being left behind. But in your becoming, you've learned something sacred. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every invitation is aligned with your becoming. So now you pause, you listen, you ask, does this expand me or drain me? Is this rooted in truth or driven by fear? Am I moving from alignment or from anxiety? And with each intentional step, your life becomes quieter but deeper, simpler but more meaningful. You choose your company, your commitments, your conversations with care. Not to isolate, but to elevate. Because you've learned that grace is not just how you treat others, it's also how you structure your life. Grace, as you now know it, is a posture of inner sovereignty. It is how you carry yourself through both chaos and calm. It is how you speak truth without cruelty. It is how you assert boundaries without burning bridges. It is how you choose dignity over drama, not because you are passive, but because you are anchored. You've stopped convincing people to see your worth. You've stopped sprinting toward outcomes that cost your peace. You've made peace your compass and grace your pace. And others notice, though you're not doing it to be noticed. They feel the quiet power of someone who is no longer reactive, but responsive. Someone who has made peace with their own imperfection. Someone who does not need to win every argument, be in every room, prove every point. You live differently now. You create space in your life for stillness, for intention, for joy that isn't rushed, for conversations that nourish, for mornings that begin with breath, not panic. You've learned the sacred art of sacred slowness, of doing less, but meaning more, of saying less, but speaking deeper, of showing up not everywhere, but fully where you are. Intentional grace is what you carry now into every room. It is the energy that says, I know who I am, I don't need to shout it. It is the poise that remains calm in conflict. It is the warmth that doesn't dim others to shine. It is the wisdom to choose when to fight and when to release, when to persist and when to let go. You begin to realize, living with grace does not mean life is easy. It means you meet life as it comes, eyes open, heart soft, spirit strong. You no longer seek to control everything, you seek to align with what is right for you. And this alignment births flow. A flow not of perfection, but of presence. This is the 10th sign. You are moving through life with intentional grace, and in doing so, you are becoming a sanctuary. A sanctuary in motion, a walking invitation for others to slow down, soften, and come home to themselves. Because grace is not only how you walk, it's how you leave a trail behind you. A trail that whispers, peace is possible, presence is powerful. You don't need to rush to matter. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to run to be seen. You just need to walk with love. And you are. The quiet triumph of becoming asterisk, and so, beloved, here you are, not at the end, but at a deeper beginning. 10 signs, 10 mirrors, 10 sacred revelations. Not of who you should be, but of who you've been all along beneath the noise, the masks, the striving. Becoming a high-value person was never about becoming someone else. It was about remembering yourself. It was about unlearning the lies that said you had to perform to be loved, perfect to be worthy, loud to be powerful. It was about returning not just to your soul, but to your truth. Each sign was a step, a doorway, a rising. From solitude to sovereignty, from discipline to grace, you have learned to stand tall, not in pride, but in purpose. You've come to realize that the most powerful people are not always the most praised, but the most present. Not the ones who dominate rooms, but the ones who shift the atmosphere just by being. You are not here to impress. You are here to embody. You are not here to arrive. You are here to align. Don't go forward gently, not in haste, but in honor. Walk with the wisdom you've earned, the softness you've chosen, and the truth that no one can take from you. You are enough. You are evolving. And your becoming is a gift. When the world forgets what matters, you will remember. When others rush to perform, you will remain rooted. And when someone asks how you became who you are, you'll smile softly and say, I listened, I learned, I let go. I loved, I became. And still, you are becoming. Let that be your quiet triumph. Let that be your legacy. Walk the path. Live the becoming. If these words have stirred something in you, not just a thought, but a remembering, then take this as your sign. Your becoming is not only valid, it is vital. The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs presence. It needs more people who are willing to live with depth instead of decoration. More voices that echo truth, instead of noise. More hearts that lead with courage, not comparison. So start where you are. You don't need a grand gesture. You don't need to wait until you're ready or healed or fearless. Begin in the quiet moments, in how you speak to yourself, in how you treat others, in what you choose when no one is watching. That is where value is built. Live the signs, not as a checklist, but as a compass. Let solitude become your sanctuary. Guard your peace like sacred ground. Choose discipline over distraction. Speak the truth, even if your voice trembles. Offer compassion to yourself and others like breath, freely, fully. Root yourself in integrity so deeply that no storm can shake it. And don't do it alone. Find your circle, not those who compete with your becoming, but those who complete the rising. People who speak the same soul language. Who challenge you to rise higher, softer, truer. And when the world tells you to be louder, be shinier, be someone else, you will know better. You will return to your rhythm, to your knowing, to your truth. Because becoming high value is not about being chosen, it's about choosing yourself. Again, and again, and again. So here is your call. Walk boldly, love deeply, guard gently, Lead quietly. And never, ever stop becoming. Your presence matters. Your authenticity is medicine. And the world needs exactly your kind of light. Now go. Not to prove, but to live. Not to impress, but to impact. Not to chase, but to embody. You are the message. You are the mirror. You are the moment. Live it. Be it. Share it. And let your life speak for itself.